Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mio on MMA podcast. I am your host, Mio, and today we're talking about UFC 302. But I will like to touch just really quickly on the fact that Nick Diaz and Tony Ferguson are booked for UFC fights in the year 2024. What are we doing? And why is anyone excited for that? Like in Diaz's case, you have a guy who basically just quit against Robbie Lawler and didn't train, like looked out of shape, fought out of shape, didn't have the cardio, and particularly given that like cardio is a weapon of his, that's a problem. And he's also talked about how he really does not want to fight anymore. Like this is a financial endeavor for him, and that's just sad. I don't want to see it. I have no love for it. I guess I'm happy the man's getting a paycheck that he probably needs, but that's about it. And then in the case of Ferguson, it's a little bit less sad because at least I do believe this is what Tony Ferguson wants to do. He is that kind of crazy person that is looking at MMA and being like, yeah, I still want to do that. That is still my dream. But at the same time, the dude is fighting underwater. Like none of the physicality that made his style work is present. Not a single bit of it. He's not super durable anymore. He got hurt by Paddy Pimblett. Come on. And then on top of that, you have the speed's gone, the power's gone, maybe not the power necessarily, but the explosiveness is gone for which to deliver that power, and speed and explosiveness being gone, and power maybe still being a thing, maybe still being there, leads to a pretty boring fighter. I do want to quickly give my whole gambling spiel here. I will be talking about betting odds because, number one, I find them informative about where the community is going. There's one fight on this card that has a ridiculous line, for example. And yes, I do bet on MMA fights. However, I've seen this idea that betting on MMA fights is a source of financial freedom, a realistically reliable, transformative economic tool, and it's not. The sport is very, very, very unpredictable at times. Results will happen, and if you put down, ridiculous sums of money and lose it, let me be clear. I think you're dumb, and I am not apologizing for giving you bad advice in that regard because, frankly, when I look at this, I'm betting very, very small amounts of money. That's my take. All right, let's get into the fights, or I guess let's talk about this card overall. This card overall is a bit of a weird one in the sense that, don't get me wrong, every fight here has some intrigue, and I'm looking forward to in some fashion. Dustin Poirier, Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title, obviously a great fight. Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa has potential for be very good. Kevin Holland, Michael Osajik, potential to be very, very good. Randy Brown, Elias Zaleski, I think is going to be very, very good. And then further on down, you got Kopylov versus Almeida. That's a solid fight. Phil Rowe versus Jake Matthews is a fun fight. Nico Price, Alex Morono, that's a fun fight. And so is Andre Liba versus Mitch Raposo. The only fight that I'm really, 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 really not looking forward to, there really isn't a version of it that looks particularly good, is probably Joe Selecki, Grant Dawson, and Jocelyn Edwards, Eileen Perez, which is not bad. That's reasonably solid. There's a couple of fights that I have mixed expectations for. Mickey Gall, Basil Hafes, for example. Also on that list would be, I guess, Costa versus Strickland. I just don't really trust Paulo Costa to be good. And then Kevin Holland and Randy Brown, I have a constant fear that they're just going to be dumb. So those are all kind of in the middle ground of these could be very good. There is a version of these fights that is very solid, but there is a version of these fights that is not very good. So let's talk about it. Well, I guess I should say, what is my negative about the card? There's not a lot of analytical stuff. There's not a lot of breakdown to do here. Every fight here I'm going to talk about for a relatively short period of time. There's none I'm going to go super, super in depth in because they don't have the ingredients for it. So there you go. Islam Makhachev, Dustin Poirier, main event, lightweight title fight. It's not really that hard of a fight to break down. I like Dustin Poirier. He is a quality grappler. He is a quality scrambler. He is one of the better boxers in MMA, at least at the lightweight division. And he is going to go in there with Islam Makhachev, who is one of the best lightweights of all time and easily the best lightweight in the world right now. He is, always going to be a little bit Khabib Nurmagomedov's shadow, but He is his own man. He's improved his striking immensely to the point where he strikes much better than Khabib did, although with less physical force because Khabib got away with a lot of like bad striking technique by just being a freak. Like the explosiveness, the speed, the power that he brought to it, the strength that he had, the raw physicality made up for a ton of shortcomings as a technical striker. And Islam has become better than that, but he is not the athlete Khabib is. Similarly, his grappling is actually probably much more sound, but again, lacking that physicality. So he's going in there with Dustin Poirier, and the problem with Dustin Poirier is he has two very, very bad habits. Number one is his comical need to pull guillotines when people try to take him down, despite the fact that he really doesn't do anything with them. He has no guillotine submissions. Sometimes they do lead to scrambles and so on, so they're not entirely useless. You can make something happen with a guillotine even if you do not get the tap out. But at the same time, it is an incredibly bad idea. It's been commented on by UFC pundits, YouTube analysts, podcasts, whatever. If you've been listening to any kind of breakdown of MMA for like a really long time, and they talked about Dustin Poirier, they have brought that up. Two, he has a tendency to retreat in straight lines that generally lead him towards the fence, and you've seen this against the likes of Michael Chandler and of course Khabib Nurmagomedov. Granted, those are fantastic wrestlers, but like it's even been against like not those good wrestlers like Benoit Saint Denis and like Dan Hooker have been able to do the same thing. Like Dan Hooker scored a bunch of takedowns on this guy. That is weird. Anyways, you're gonna go in there and he's gonna go in there and he's gonna make those mistakes. And if you make those mistakes against Islam Makhachev, I am not picking you because Makhachev is, not unknockable, not unKOable. I mean, he was knocked out by Adriano Martins. But like, if you are going to let him have the front foot emphasis to drag you back into wrestling exchanges along the fence, he's going to take those. He's going to clinch you. He's going to take you down. He's going to do his thing. And again, yes, Poirier is a good scrambler, frankly an elite scrambler. So is Islam Makhachev. And if you're going to give Islam Makhachev the initial good positions, he is going to maintain them to a certain degree, and he is going to out-scramble you, out-grapple you, and eventually achieve dominance. And that's why I have Islam Makhachev probably by a rear naked choke. I know I said there's a lot of differences between Khabib and Islam, but I'm picking Islam basically to do the same thing to Dustin. And I understand that is a bit weird, given I was trying to differentiate between the two, but at the same time, it is probably going to happen at some point. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be a competitive affair. It's going to be a fun affair. Dustin Poirier is never in a boring fight. It's just the path to victory for him, even training with the right people like Mateusz Gamrot and so on, is not really there. Obviously, maybe this is the one he does pull off the guillotine. Maybe he does hit a hot one. Maybe he does hit a nice counter. Maybe he does end up on top of Islam in a scramble and pounds him out. These are on the table. But the pathway to them involve a lot of X factors and random circumstance and happenstance that I can't pick it. And obviously the betting line shows this, minus 600 to minus 699 on Makhachev. He is the biggest favorite on the card. Poirier is the biggest underdog at plus 425 to plus 500. I can't argue with that. I can't argue with Dustin Poirier being that kind of underdog because, that's the problem, is that Dustin Poirier is 35 years old, which is old for lightweight. It's a bit late for him to unlearn the bad habits that he has. And he has some very, very bad habits that pertain to this specific matchup. Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. I'm going with Sean Strickland by decision. I don't even know if it really hurts me because I don't like either of these guys. Both as fighters and as people. They seem kind of scummy and in the cage. I shouldn't say I dislike Strickland's in the cage because actually I have a lot of respect for Strickland's heavy teep, heavy jab based, pace based, pressure based style. It's very, very impressive. It's exceptionally impressive because everybody who fights Sean Strickland knows exactly what's coming, and yet so few of them actually seem to beat him. Kind of a marvel, kind of amazing. It's just that when you compare that to the wild man, caveman, psycho that he portrays himself as, and probably is to a certain degree, and that his fans tend to bring it up. Every time you bring up Sean Strickland on Twitter, you'll get a bunch of people talking about how amazing his fights are, and it's very, very few of them are amazing. And if they are, it's because of the moment. It's the Sean Strickland, Izzy Adesanya moment of I can't believe Adesanya is being just taken apart here. It's not anything to do with how Strickland's fighting or doing or whatever. He's not a big KO artist. He's not a big blood and guts kind of guy necessarily, despite the fact that he talks about it like that. It's similar Similar to like Colby Covington talking about how much of a badass he is, and then you watch him fight and you're like, no. But Paulo Costa is for a guy who has been at the top of this division for as long as he has, which has been years at this point, including a title shot against Izzy Adesanya where he got pantsed, fought Robert Whitaker, and did relatively well. He's a guy who's not going to get blown out or anything. Like, he's got all the physicality you could ask for. He's durable, he's tough, he's got speed, he's got explosiveness, and so on. But there's just not really a lot of structure to his game, and it kind of shows when you look at who he's beaten. If I may, for a moment here, pull up the record, because I think it's really, really important to really, appreciate this. Paulo Costa has lost to Robert Whitaker, Marvin Vettori, and Israel Adesanya. He has beaten Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero, Uriah Hall, and Johnny Hendricks. Those are his 4 signature wins. And if you look at it, you really look at it, Rockhold was a broken man. Romero is this, guy who loses every fight until he starts winning, basically. Like, essentially, if Yoel Romero doesn't finish you, he's probably going to lose if you are remotely good. Has Yoel Romero ever, how many decisions has Yoel Romero won? Kind of curious. Thiago Santos, okay, that makes sense. Jacare Ray in a fight that was very, very contentious, it has to be said. Brad Tavares is Brad Tavares. That's it. That is it. And these are all fights that like went the same way, where like he was losing almost until winning. And then you have Uriah Hall, easily unmanned by a physical presence, and bullyable Johnny Hendricks, a 2017 version of Johnny Hendricks, fighting out of his weight class. And honestly, that's just kind of hilarious as a 4th biggest win. Essentially, Paulo Costa has a lot of the ingredients that Dricus du Plessis used to defeat Sean Strickland. I just don't trust any of his brain or decision-making processes or his ability to game plan to make that happen. He has the raw physicality, but that is it. And as a result, I trust Sean Strickland to jab him, to teep him, to outpace him, and to win the fight. Is there a version of this that ends up as a loss? Sure, totally. But there's no reason to pick Costa. It's a reasonably close betting line. Minus 240 to minus 258 for Strickland. Plus 190 to plus 210 for Paulo Costa. That's about it. I do have Strickland by decision, like I said. There you go. Kevin Holland, Michael Oksajic, and Randy Brown, Eliza Zaleski. I'm going to talk about these together. They're not back-to-back on the card, but they're like very, very much a very, very similar dynamic. You have Kevin Holland, Randy Brown, who are the comparisons here. They're both 6'3". They both have insane reaches. They're both like tall string beans guys. They're both fantastic athletes. They have all the physical attributes that you could ask for. They are fast. They are reasonably strong for their build. Particularly Holland is very strong. Holland is very, very durable. Randy Brown is also quite durable. And they have seemingly good cardio. They seemingly pick up little tricks and stuff like really very easily. But they both have the same problem, and that is the ability to stay on task. They're both guys who wander off the game plan, wander off of things that are working. Examples of this would be Kevin Holland versus Wonderboy Thompson. Of course, when he, just lets Wonderboy stand up and basically consented to have a Wonderboy fight with Wonderboy, and you're not going to beat Wonderboy with that. And even the MVP fight, as much as I think that was a better display, where he was like trying to get things done and trying to force it to a grindy thing and just couldn't. Like it was that was more of a can't versus a don't. It still had some of those hallmarks there, and then you could also see this in like grappling with Brendan Allen and stuff when you don't need to. And then Randy Brown, it's not so much that Randy Brown will like let people dictate the fight. It's that Randy Brown seems to get bored, and like he'll be working a game plan that works totally. He'll be working behind a long jab, an array of kicks, and so on, and keeping the person at range and doing his thing. But then he'll like want to do something else. He'll be like, I learned this in the gym the other day, and I need to test it out. Maybe not like the other day, but like he's like, there are things I've been working on in the gym over these last couple of months. I really want to bring them to the table and test them out in the cage. And sometimes it backfires and it goes very, very poorly. Or it leads to like ridiculously close matches that like, it's like you have the way to win. It's right here. Here's the plan. Here's the game plan. Just do it and you can win. So then that way they're very, very similar. They're fighting guys who are also kind of similar. Michael Oksajic is a body hunting, like volume puncher, really aggressive dude. I like him. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Leslie Zaleski as well. Very creative, violent striker with good power, amazing amazing durability. fairly good. I would say very good cardio, but he did get tired beating Benoit Saint Denis so badly. Um, they're guys who could take advantage of openings and like mistakes by both of the opponents, but they're both facing like very similar hills here. There's a 7-inch reach gap between Holland and Oleksiejczuk, along with 3-inch height. Between Zaleski and Brown, there is a 5-inch reach and a 4-inch height difference. So like it's a very similar fight in both cases. And I am going to take Holland and I'm going to take Randy Brown, but I am nervous about picking both of them. They're both, well, Brown's not, but like Holland is a pretty big favorite. Holland I have by submission because at some point Oleksiejczuk does expose his neck quite a bit. And Holland, even if he doesn't want to go back to his old school bit of only cowards and me wrestle, he probably will get the opportunity to sink something in like a Darce choke or a rear naked choke or anything like that. Like Oleksiejczuk just is kind of that inherently, here's my neck kind of guy. And then I've got Brown by decision because I don't really see how he finishes Zaleski. Like I said, very durable guy. And it's not like Brown has a tremendous ground game that can like waste away Zaleski. Zaleski's probably actually the better grappler of the two. In the terms of the odds, Holland is a minus 275 to minus 310 favorite. Oleksiejczuk coming back at plus 215 to plus 245. Randy Brown is a minus 170 to minus 185 favorite. Zaleski is plus 140 to plus 155. Then we have in between these ones, we have a nice little like heavyweight sandwich here. Gelton Almeida versus Alexander Romanov. This is unfortunately a really, really, really simplistic fight. These are two of the few heavyweights that actually grapple, that actually have pretty good takedown games and pretty good top control. And it's just really whoever gets that first takedown, I think, is going to end up winning the fight because I don't trust either of these guys to make adjustments or to get back up when they're down. Romanov feels like a guy who, if he's put behind the 8 ball, will just kind of crumble. We kind of saw that a little bit with Marcin Tybura. And then with Gelton Almeida, you have a guy who I just don't think can. Like if you look at it, the takedowns he shoots are the same takedown like all the time. There's no creativity. There's not even very good technique on the matter. It's just like raw physicality, speed, explosiveness, etc. to get him down. So like I don't trust either of these guys to start off wrong and not come back, or and to come back. So there you go. I'm going to go with Almeida. I like his takedown game a little bit more than I like Romanov's. Well, that's not true. I like it in this matchup more. I like Romanov's better overall because he's got a lot of like upper body clinch stuff, which tends to work a lot better at heavyweight than what Almeida is doing. But in terms of the actual matchup itself, I like Almeida's ability to probably get him down and to control him. He does not have great ground and pound though, and Romanov's never been subbed, so I think this probably has to go the distance. So I've got Almeida by decision. He is a minus 250 to minus 315 favorite. I think that's too wide. And Romanov is plus 205 to plus 245. Then we have Roman Kopylov versus Cesar Almeida. This is actually really, really good matchmaking because Almeida is coming off that fight against Dylan Butko, which was terrible. It was terrible. And they're putting him in there with a guy who's probably not going to try and do what Butko was trying to do to him again. So he's probably going to, give Almeida the fight that he wants. Almeida, of course, is I think he was a glory kickboxer. Was he a glory kickboxer? 1 second here. I need to remember. Like, because I'm trying to recall because he fought on 3 separate occasions, your boy, Alex Pereira. And that makes me think he's a glory kickboxer, but they're also both from Brazil. And I want to say they were fairly early in the career. So it might not have been glory. You can tell I'm not a huge kickboxing fan. I love kickboxing, but yeah, he's a glory guy. And where were the Pereira fights? The Pereira fights were not in glory, but they both ended up there. Getting back to it, he is kind of a lot like Cesar Almeida, or a lot like Alex Pereira, and I think they're hoping he takes a similar pathway. But like at the same time, he's 36 years old, and he's not as good as Pereira. Like he has 1 win over Pereira, but he's also got 2 losses. And you got to remember Pereira's kickboxing career it's a little bit weird because like if you were rarely prepared for Almeida or for Pereira, there are gaps, but there's like fantastic physical power and so on. Anyways, I'm going with Almeida. Kopylov will probably give him the fight that he wants, which is, like I said, going to be a mostly pocket boxing and kickboxing exchange. And I just think he's better than that. Kopylov is probably the better grappler, probably the better wrestler even, but Almeida is fairly strong and fairly difficult to take down. Like he's got the basic concepts of the Alex Pereira MMA transition down kind of already, where he punishes people heavily in the clinch and also is, fairly hard to manhandle, as Dylan Butko. And Kopylov is not a wrestler first. Like we've never seen him I don't even know if we've ever seen him hit a takedown. Let's see here, quick. Ba-ba-bum. I have UFC stats open for a change. That's kind of the gimmick here, is I usually forget to open UFC stats before recording this. Takedowns. Oh, he's got one. All right. He took down Punahele Soriano, and he surprisingly enough, took down Albert Duraev. Interesting. But yeah, it's not really a part of his game. And I don't really see him taking it to Almeida in that regard. So I've got Almeida by TKO. Decision is also pretty possible. Kopylov, I don't think has ever been stopped by strikes, and he is a really tough guy. But yeah, I do have to take Almeida. I mean, it may look really, really bad. Like Kopylov might come out and just start taking him down really, really easily, and he does fight at a higher pace, so maybe he can just out sprint Almeida. But I doubt it. Grant Dawson versus Joe Selecki is a battle of two top control grapplers who are not very good strikers, not very venomous on the ground or in the transitions. And as a result, I just have to go with the better wrestler, and that's Grant Dawson. Because Joe Selecki is a guy who we've seen kind of just out-wrestled a couple of times, whereas Grant Dawson has gone out there with some pretty good wrestlers, some very high pedigree guys, and still implemented his game. So Grant Dawson by decision. He is a minus 450 to minus 530 favorite. And Selecki is plus 340 to plus 380. Oh, I don't think I did odds for the Kopylov fight. Almeida is minus 110 to minus 129. Kopylov plus 105 to minus 110. That makes sense. Almeida is in MMA very, very unproven, even if this stylistic matchup really does favor him. Philip Rowe versus Jake Matthews. I'm not really sure what to make of this fight because I don't trust either guy. I mean, Phil Rowe, I'm watching, while breaking this down, watching him willingly clinch with Neil Magny, which is the last thing you should do. He's a phenomenally large fighter, though. He's 6'3", 80.5 inches in reach. Like, he's Kevin Holland, basically. Like, again, I hate to compare the black guys to the black guys, but, like, we've had three guys here, Randy Brown, Kevin Holland, Phil Rowe, who are all 6'3" with, like, around an 80-inch reach and usually fight at 170. Holland's up at 185 right now. But, like, they're massive 170ers who have all the physical talent in the world, but at the same time have, like, terrible decision-making. And Jake Matthews is not much better in terms of decision-making because, to be clear, he thinks he's a really, really slick boxer. Convinced himself that during the Andre Filo fight, I guess, probably before that. But the Filo fight was like, all right, maybe he's got something here. And then we realized Andre Filo is just, like, actually just kind of washed. And Jake Matthews has kind of lost everything since then. I think he has one, like, can win over. Yeah, he beat Darius Flowers. I gotta go with Phil Rowe. Like, even Darius Flowers had some success, and Darius Flowers is very much a joke of a fighter by UFC standards. Like, he really should not be here, like, in a nutshell. And yet that went, to a second round submission, and like I if I recall correctly, I didn't rewatch the fight here for this one, but I remember Flowers winning the first round and having a great deal of success. So yeah, I can't trust Matthews against a guy who's got physical edges. He's got reach, he's got power, he's got durability, he's got a grinding clinch game that he can utilize with some punishing strikes there. I've got Phil, and I don't trust Matthews to avoid the clinch with him. Ironically, he's playing the role of Phil Rowe here. I've got to go with Phil Rowe by decision, and I'm pleased to see he's got underdog odds at plus 126 to plus 143. So I'll be making a small wager on that one. Matthews minus 155 to minus 180. It's not a trustworthy fight with Phil Rowe. If you think Jake Matthews is going to win, I'm not going to try and dissuade you, but he is facing an 8.5 inch reach discrepancy and 4 inches of height. So for a guy who I don't trust to fight against physical limitations, it's hard to pick him there. I am a little surprised that he's the favorite. Nico Price versus Alex Morono is the classic athlete versus crafty technician, which is like every Morono fight because dude's like super unathletic for the weight class in the UFC. Simply put, here, Price's chin is going and his defense has never been good. Like he has to fight in a really aggressive way that exposes his chin, and he got away with it by being very, very durable. And he's been knocked out a couple of times lately. Phil Rowe knocked him out. Robbie Lawler knocked him out in his retirement fight. So I have to go with Morono. He is a good counterpuncher. He is, I don't want to say slick, because slick, I think, implies a speed edge that he doesn't really have, or like a reaction edge that he doesn't really have. But he is very, very good at finding counter shots and finding chins of guys who are going to give him opportunities and openings. And that's why, at the end of the day, I've got to take Morono. Probably to knock out Nico Price here, but like, who knows? Nico Price is a big dude. He does have some level of a grinding grappling game that he can employ. Perhaps Morono is a good grappler, but he's a bullyable one because he's not super. He's not again. It's a physical limitation. He's not super strong, super athletic, super explosive. So you can just kind of like grind on him and make things happen. He's not really going to be able to force you off of him. So there are opportunities here for Nico Price to win. This could be an interesting fight, but I think Nico Price at 34 years old is just kind of at the end of the line here. And I have Morono by TKO. He's a minus 225 to minus 275 favorite. Price is plus 185 to plus 215. And we get to, I believe, the second largest favorite on the card and the line that I think doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Mickey Gall versus Basil Hafez. I don't know what to make of this fight. Mickey Gall does look absolutely washed. Like it's not that losing to Mike Malott, Alex Morono, and Mike Perry is actually a problem. Like you look at those names, it's like those are all solid UFC level fighters, except for Mike Perry now. But like Mike Perry is his own like weird thing. But it's if you watch the fights, it's just like Mike. I don't know if Mickey Gall knows what he wants to do at any point. He's also taken 2 years off. He's looking just washed and like uninterested and not progressing. That being said, he still is a pretty big dude at 6'2", 74 inches, and he does have a good grappling game, which is Basil Hafez's main way of winning. So, like, the weird thing here is, I'll get to the line here. Hafez is a minus 350 to minus 430 favorite, and Gall is plus 275 to plus 310. Don't get me wrong. Betting on Gall or even picking him to win does not feel good, and I'm going to do that. But, like, Basil Hafez's main game is grappling, and I'm not sure that he's better than Gall at it. I'm not sure he's a better striker than Gall. I know Hafez had a really, really solid fight against Jack Della Maddalena, but he did lose. And I think people need to be careful about overrating somebody in a loss, particularly, to be clear, the third different opponent that JDM was preparing for in that fight. We are talking about a Basil Hafez who lost a competitive fight to Evan Kutz and had a very, very competitive fights with Anthony Ivy that he won. And like these are guys that are not UFC level. Like it really does feel like you look at his resume. This is the guy who should be like, here is our Dana White Contenders Series stable guy. He is here to take on 170ers from the regional scene to see if they are UFC caliber. Because if they beat him, they probably are. If they lose to him, they aren't. And granted, Mickey Gall may not be that, but I am going to go with Mickey Gall. I've seen him win in the UFC. I've seen him beat impressive fighters. I have never seen that from Basil Hafez because realistically, his resume for a UFC fighter is just quite poor. He is, like I said, 1-1 with Evan Kutz. He is 1-0 with a split decision against Anthony Ivy, who is not good, by the way. Anthony Ivy is like 14-7. He's like a semi-athletic dude who like is just not very good at anything. But like somehow lost 5 consecutive fights to Christian Aguilera in the UFC, Brian Barberena in the UFC, very, very one-sided fights, and then lost to Nikolai Veretnikov, who I don't even know, and then Basil Hafez and Joel Ballman, and like somehow didn't retire. Actually has a decent little run going right now against guys who are similar to him. But that's not who you should be going to split decisions with if you are in the UFC and you are going to beat like, things. I know Mickey Gall is 7-5, but that's mostly in the UFC. Like it or not, his losses are to Randy Brown, Diego Sanchez, Mike Perry, Alex Morono, and Mike Malott. Those are all fights that I would expect him to lose. I think I might have picked him to beat Malott because I was sleeping on Malott. But still, this feels a lot more like the Salim Tuhari or the Jordan Williams or the George Sullivan fights that, he did win. So I'm not going to be surprised if Hafez wins because Gall is that kind of shot. But at the same time, I can't resist those odds. Jocelyn Edwards versus Eileen Perez. Jocelyn Edwards is a case of a fighter who has a way higher ceiling than Eileen Perez because she is a very good athlete. Like she is fast, explosive, strong for the weight class. But like nothing's really put together. She's got the frame to be like a really long range effective fighter, but she gets closed down and ends up clinching a lot. A lot of her fights are defined by takedowns. She was taken down quite a bit by Carol Hossa, Jessica Rose Clark, Lucy Pudilova, and Even ended up in the clinch a lot with Nora Cornoli, who she took down, and with 8.5 minutes of top control, did not win the fight, which is a problem. It's actually probably the biggest problem for Edwards is that she can get takedowns, but when she does nothing with them. There is no offense really from her top position. It is pure control, and not even particularly good control. And Eileen Perez, who I really, really do not like, because I've always said this. I'm not really big on like fighters who over sexualize themselves as their main draw, and that's kind of Eileen Perez's thing. Like I have no problem with twerking. I have no problem with a big booty lady. I enjoy those things. It's just her entire character as a MMA fighter is kind of odious and kind of overhyping herself. I think at one point she was demanding like a title shot on Twitter, and like, she hadn't won a fight yet. Anyways, for the fight, she can grapple. She is a strong hoss of a woman who can get on top and land some good ground and pound and does some good things. She can strike a little bit, not particularly well, but a little bit. And I have to take her because because Edwards is not going to avoid that kind of grindy fight. So there you go. Eileen Perez by decision. She will twerk in the cage once again. She is the minus 180 to minus 200 favorite. Edwards is plus 150 to plus 165. Rolling on to Andre Lima versus Mitch Raposo, which is a good opener for the night, but Mitch Raposo is not a UFC level fighter, just on a physical level. Like, I think he's actually a reasonably good grappler and so on, but like his wins on the regional scene are very much against very low end athletes and guys he can just bully. He's not going to be able to bully Andre Lima, who has his own. I have concerns about him going into the Igor Severino fight. By the way, he's the guy who got bit by Igor Severino and has tattooed the bite mark. I had worries about him being like a little bit low paced and so on, and like maybe a little bit clinchable. But he's not bad in the clinch. Like, he's not easy to take down. He will punish you in the clinch. He will actually seek the clinch himself. We saw that with the Severino fight. And he is a pretty solid kickboxer. So like at range, he's going to, get his licks in. I think that there is some changes, some adaptations he needs to do, but he's 25 years old. He's got time, and he's got the physical elements to go high. Whereas Raposo, I think, is, despite being 25 years old, kind of the finished product because dude is not that athletic. He's pursuing a pathway that doesn't lead to great success for a guy like him. So I've got Lima by decision. He is a minus 250 to minus 275 favorite. Raposo to plus 200 to plus 220. That feels about right. Anyways, that is all. So check down my links down below for my video game stuff, the MMA simulator on the Discord, and for a UFC pay-per-view. This was pretty short. Oh, social medias as well, down below. Anyways, have a good one. Enjoy the fights, and I'll see you after them to recap what happened. And hopefully, it's a way better card than I'm even hoping.